Green Bay Packers, the 14-3 Green Bay Packers, heading to San Francisco to take on the 49ers, 13-3 during the regular season, won their divisional round matchup. So they're also 14-3. The line, 7.5 in favor of the Niners, opened at 7, moved up a half point. The total has stayed at 45, 57% of bets, 63% of money on the 49ers here. And then when you look at the total, 73% of the bets on the over, 73% of the money on the over, and yet that total has stayed still at 45. That kind of tells you, where the books are at with this one. But Stuck, initial thoughts on how these two teams match up and where you're going with your pick.
Yeah, I mean, I like the under here. And the first meeting, San Fran won 37-8, and I mean, their defense dominated. Their defense wasn't even as healthy as it is now. So I think that the San Fran defense should show out. Now, what happened in that game is if you look at what the Packers have done, their offense hasn't been spectacular, although Rodgers made some vintage throws to lock up that game and in the second half last week. But their offense hasn't been anywhere close to elite all year. But where it has been elite is early on in games. So, during the scripted portion, this is a team that is top 3 in the NFL in first quarter points. Just look at go look at any of their home games and a number of the games. Go look at the Redskins game. This is a team that goes up early in games and then a lot of times has to hold on. It happened again against Seattle last week. That script was flipped against San Fran. So in the first drive of the game, and by the way, these are two, from a turnover perspective, these are two complete opposite quarterbacks. Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history as far as taking care of the ball, and Jimmy G can get a little loose with the ball at times. But in the first drive of that game, Rodgers fumbled and San Fran took over at the 2-yard line and they scored. And they went up 7-0, and then it kind of snowballed from there. And the Green Bay offense isn't going to come back on that San Fran pass rush, that San Fran secondary, especially now. So I think a fast start for Green Bay is paramount. So that's something to keep an eye on. Because if they go down 7-14-0 again, then it makes them one-dimensional. And the way that you have to try and attack San Fran is you have to try and keep them honest and stay committed to the running game. When you're down 23-0 at the half and you have Aaron Rodgers, you're not really going to stay committed to the running game. But on the other side, it's this Green Bay defense is, against the run, it's been improved since the bye week. I mean, a healthy Kenny Clark has helped a ton. And this is a team, what's going to be really interesting for me to see is that, they like to play a lot of, and I've said this before, they like to play a lot of heavy dime. You'll see like Ibrahim Campbell, a safety in there as your other linebacker. Raven Green, I've heard Raybon Green maybe. I've heard people say his first name differently. But Raven Green, who's, first couple weeks, he's, I think, better against the run in that safety. You might see him back. But regardless, it's a smaller – second level. And then, if you go back and look at a lot of their problems early on in the year against the run, and Patton will say this, and a lot of this is like a narrative type of statement, but it's actually true from what I was seeing with Green Bay early in the year, is that there was a lot of missed assignments. There was people out of position in that front seven, and they were just giving up just enormous holes, right? And there was just explosive runs all over the place. So they've seemed to shore some of that up, but you're going to get a huge test today. Well, the game's not today. You're going to get a huge test this weekend against the San Fran offense that will test that as well as any team in the NFL with all their motion, their pre-snap motion, their misdirection. So how much improved is Green Bay's defense from a run discipline perspective from that first game to this game? It's still a question. I think they're better. And, I don't care. I mean, look, Seattle's offensive line was decimated and they're on their 5th and 6th string backs. I mean, I don't know. I don't take a ton from what they did in that game. So I think that's a key. But the first thing that, jumped out to me is this line is 7.5. And I know you're going to go back to your San Fran boys, but this line was 3 in the first meeting. And you were on San Fran then too, and it turned out to be a bad line. But that's a pretty significant jump. Now, San Fran's defense healthier now. They're going to get some pieces back. So, and Green Bay in that first game had 2.8 yards per play. So I think this is a low-scoring game. And from a pace perspective, these are not two fast teams. You're 18th and 20th in neutral pace situations. So you're not going to see, a ton of pace. San Fran is obviously going to run it a lot. But they're going to pass it intelligently. They're going to throw it on first downs. But Green Bay, I think, is going to have to try and stay committed to run. So I think this is a low scoring defensive game. As far as my contractual obligation to mention my Packers future, and all year I'm kicking myself for not having a Ravens future, and the Ravens are the best team in the NFL, and the Packers stunk all year, and here I am with my 18-1, and the Ravens are at home. It just shows you it's one game scenario. You never know what can happen. So in regards to the Packers future, I have 18-1, and you can't really hedge it here. Because if you think about it, they're more than they're about 2-1 underdog. If the Chiefs win and get to the Super Bowl, they're about, Chiefs will probably be minus 200. Line will be around Chiefs minus 6, 5, 6, somewhere in that ballpark. So what are you going to do? I mean, your hedge options are limited even with just 2 games now. So I'll probably let the future ride. Now what you could do is the Packers play second. So if the Titans upset the Chiefs, then you have a little more flexibility because the Packers would be a small favorite over the Titans in the Super Bowl. Maybe it comes out a pick if the Titans win and, they look really impressive and there's some perception bump. I think some look ahead lines now have it Packers minus 2.5. But regardless, instead of being a 6-1 underdog, you're a favorite or a pick. You have a little more options. But I'm personally 90% sure I'm letting it ride. Maybe Green Bay goes up early, as they've done in so many games, and then I can take some San Fran live as a partial hedge to the future. But that's where I stand from a future perspective. But I do think that it's an under game. Green Bay at least has a good offensive line, but it's just you're going to need an enormous game from Devontae Adams in order for this Green Bay offense to go nuts on the opposite of Sherman. And maybe Tyler Ervin, who's been a godsend for the Packers, can make a play, mainly in the return game. This is a guy who came to Green Bay in December. He has more punt returns than the whole team did prior to that. And they can maybe use him on some jet sweeps and things like that. But it's going to be a tough ask because this 49ers defense is healthy, and they're as good as it gets. And then I do think that the Green Bay defense will be a little better than we saw in the first time around. So I'm going to throw out, this is – I'm going to say neither team gets beyond 24. So give me the under 45.
Yeah, and I think that is the better side of this line. I don't think the total is too far off. I like the Niners better at 7.5. I took them at 7. Wrote that up in our early bets piece that came out on ActionNetwork.com earlier in the week. But and I know you might disagree here, but I have a lot more confidence in this pick, I think, than pretty much any other for this weekend. And the reason is because I think that, and I've been kind of on the 49ers, like they're like my anti-Titans. Like I'm pretty much always wrong about, when I was, at least with the spreads with the Titans, but I've kind of been on the Niners. I've had a good read on them. I felt like, even in that Rams game where everyone kind of felt like they would come back down to earth early in the year, they came out and just dominated the Rams. Packers, same deal. Vikings last week. And I think, what stood out to me about this line was that it opened at 7. And, the Niners also closed as 7-point favorites against the Vikings in that divisional round. Well, by pretty much any metric you look at, the Vikings are a better team than the Packers. Not win-loss record, because the Packers happen to match up extremely well with the Vikings and beat them up in 2 games, one of them which the Vikings went down 21-0, I think it was, and then ended up losing 21-16. But Packers went 2-0 against the Vikings, which kind of shifts it and shifts the perception. But you look at something like Simple Rating System, which is just essentially schedule adjusted margin of victory, and the Vikings are 5.4, the Packers are 3.2, Niners are up at 11.0, and then you look at DVOA. Vikings had a better team than the Packers. They were 7th, Packers 10th. Vikings about twice as efficient in terms of the actual percentages versus the league average in DVOA. So the Vikings just happened not to match it well with the Packers. That kind of knocked it down. But I think this line should be bigger because the Niners have the same advantages pretty much that they had against the Vikings against this Green Bay team. The top advantage being, and the reason I think it will be tough for Green Bay to stay close if they don't get, a turnover or something like that, ends up scoring. I think it'll be tough is because the same way you beat the Vikings offense, Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, is you get pressure without blitzing. I keep hammering this home because the 49ers were really the only team in the NFL that was able to truly accomplish this at an elite level. They blitzed at the second highest rate during the regular season, 28.7%. They got pressure at the second highest rate during the regular season, 28.7% per Pro Football Focus, blitzed at the fourth lowest rate, just under 21% of the time. And when you can do that, that means that you have, 7 guys to devote to coverage. And, the reason they can do that is because they have Nick Bosa, they have Armstead, they have D Ford back now. So the Niners, they can get pressure. Their pressure rate was even higher when D Ford was healthy and Quan Alexander and was healthy. But they can get pressure without blitzing. And then you look at Rodgers' numbers this year, and you look at him in the different splits. And when he's faced a blitz, as most elite quarterbacks do, he has shredded it. So his numbers against the blitz this year are, hold on, okay, 1, 2, 3. So Rodgers' numbers against the blitz this year: 148 attempts, 8.3 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, no picks. And then you look at his numbers against a normal rush, and still 19 touchdowns, 4 picks, but on 448 attempts and only 6.7 yards per attempt. So you can really neutralize Rodgers by not blitzing him. He's going to turn the ball over. If he does turn the ball over, it's going to be usually when you don't blitz. And on top of that, he's not going to put the ball in danger, which explains the low yard per attempt. And then you look at, okay, how can the 49ers, what makes them elite? The reason they led the NFL in net yards per pass attempt, at 4.8, is because they can also cover, especially Quan Alexander back, really quick linebacker. And then you have Jaquiski Tartt at safety, really smart, makes a lot of the defensive calls when he's back there, can man up on tight ends if need be. And then you look at how they cover, and Devontae Adams in that first matchup, 12 targets, 43 yards. He had 43 yards receiving and 44 yards after the catch, which means his average reception took place essentially at the line of scrimmage, and it was all after the catch. Well, for the season, Adams, his average reception is about 7.5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. So you can neutralize Adams. It goes a long way toward neutralizing the offense, because you look at last week, Rodgers, 243 yards passing, 160 for Adams. That's 2/3 of the yardage to Adams. Then you look at Rodgers in that game against San Fran, 104 yards passing, his lowest total in any game in his career in which he had 23 or more pass attempts. So I think that it's going to be really tough to find answers to neutralize this 49ers defense. If you're the Packers, I think the one thing they'll do is try to run it. On first down, San Francisco was 29th in the league in rush success rate. So that's what you're going to have to do. But then you look at last week, and they have all these guys healthy, and they have Alexander, who had speed, even if he was a little rusty, and they hold Dalvin Cook in check. He only had 26 yards on 15 touches. So Aaron Jones had one 23-yard run. I think it was on the opening drive last week against Seattle, and then he ends the game 21 for 62, under 3 yards a carry. San Fran has more rest. Jones got banged around in that game. Jamal Williams still not fully healthy, apparently. So, I think it's really going to be tough, for the Packers. Just a median outcome, I think, is more than a one possession game in this case. And I think it's just really, if you kind of, project it out, it's closer to 10 than it is to 7, in my opinion. And
but a lot of those numbers are based on if this Green Bay defense is not significantly improved, right? Like, if you believe that they are.
I'm talking about straight up, like, I'll take the entire year San Francisco numbers, because that kind of evens it out. Because San Francisco almost they had a major drop off in defense in weeks 14 through 17, which was when you had Tartt out every game. You had Ford, I think he played a few snaps, but he was out. Sherman missed the game, and then you had Quan Alexander, he was out for all those games. So you kind of take those and then you say, okay, yes, Green Bay's defense was improved, but you look at who they played down the stretch, and they didn't play a lot of great offenses. You know, they played Detroit, they played Chicago. They played Detroit, they played Chicago, they played all these teams. So, you know, I think it kind of evens out for both of these teams to where, you know, the drop-offs and you know, some of the improvements that they've had. And I still think that this line should be closer to 10. And I definitely think it should be, you know, a point and a half higher than the Vikings game. So, yeah, I like San Francisco at 7.5. Again, I just think it should be larger than that. And I do like the under because I do think that, I mean, I like the under more than the over because I do think that Green Bay does try to run it on first down, especially. I think they do see that that's probably where you're going to get San Francisco. And then on the other side, you saw San Francisco. I mean, what did they run it? Like 20 straight times once they got up against Minnesota last week? So, and they had success, which is, you know, they could still score doing that, which is amazing. But yeah, I think with the extra rest, the extra day here, you know, they have 3 backs. Breida, I don't know if he plays as much, but they still have 3 backs that they could conceivably use. So even though they had a lot of runs last week, no one particularly got banged up or kind of overworked. And then you look at on the other side, I mean, Aaron Jones, 21 carries, you know, for the season, he's down, you know, he's usually in the mid-teens. So I just think that you look at it all, and I think it's another one of these situations that just favors less scoring and it favors the Niners and Aaron Rodgers even on the road. I mean, you know, first of all, Aaron Rodgers since Adams came back, the numbers are still ugly. 6.14 yards per attempt. You know, just one point, little over 1.3 touchdowns per game. And then you look at his numbers on the road, and at home he's averaging 8 yards an attempt. On the road he's averaging 6.1. So, you know, we talk about Rodgers and Lambeau. I took the Pack last week. I thought they could cover the short spread. They barely did. But I think it's going to be tough. I don't think this is like something, a few coaching, you know, adjustments or like, you know, not fumbling that football inside the, you know, inside scoring position and giving San Fran that early lead. I don't think that's something that necessarily knocks a ton off of the final outcome. I just think San Francisco's defense, as they have been all year when healthy with those 3 key guys, Tart, Ford, and Alexander. I just think this is a dominant defense that, you know, it's tough to beat, it's tough to score on, and it's tough to stay close against.
Yeah, I mean, but the one difference that I will say between Minnesota and Green Bay is that, I mean, obviously you take Rodgers over Cousins in a big game and he gets rid of the ball a little quicker, but Green Bay obviously has a much better offensive line. And, you know, Bulaga's going to play. So at least they have 2 tackles that are really good, that, you know, can at least compete with San Fran. But their offensive line is a lot better, which theoretically helps. But what I think the formula for the Packers, and I think the 49ers are going to win this game. Now, it's still one football game, right? So, like last week against last week against the Vikings, you know, a couple plays, who knows what happens? You know, that the muff punt, the Cousins pick, and then the fumble, you know, got overturned. I never actually got a really good look at it. I don't disagree with the call, but say that is a fumble. You know, San Fran turns around, scores a touchdown. So this is what Green Bay has to do, because Green Bay's defense has been opportunistic all year, right? That's why a lot of their numbers, they've won more games than their numbers would indicate that they have, is that their defense will give up a ton of yards and then they'll get a big pick. They'll get a big sack and pressure and strip fumble. You know, so and they didn't do that in the first game against San Fran, but that's what they'll need to do here, because there's, you know, one weakness in Jimmy G's game now is that he can get careless with the ball. And it's not like he's chucking it downfield. I mean, this is a guy with the lowest depth of target in the NFL. He just has a bunch of receivers that are also getting a ton of yards, which is where their explosiveness comes from when you're trying to stop their run. But Green Bay is going to have to force a turnover. This is the formula, especially for people listening to the future. And I don't necessarily disagree with your bet. Like, I'm not betting Green Bay, but I'm not hedging my future. And I think that if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably just take the 7F because that's how I'm programmed. But, you know, because I make it right around the touchdown. But this is what they're going to do. You have to get a fast start. Have to. Absolute must. They're going to have to get a turnover, which a turnover or 2, I think, and then Rodgers can't turn it over. I trust the Rodgers won't turn it over more than the other 2. Because Rodgers, I mean, is probably, I think, maybe 1 or 2 in the NFL in turnover rate per game. But can they find a way in the scripted portion of the game where they excelled at all year? Can they find a way to have enough really solid scripted plays to go down the field? They got to feed Adams, I think. I mean, I think that the one weak link in that secondary is potentially Witherspoon on the outside trying to stay with someone in man coverage, which they'll run on third downs.
No, he won't play. He might not play. I mean, he'll play. He'll play if they go to 4 wide. I think, but I don't know if he'll play.
Whoever's out on Adams, that's on third downs. I mean, that's where Rodgers has to look and has to, because you're not going to get anything on the other side with anybody else against Sherman, and you're not going to get much up the middle with the way that their defense plays. So it's going to have to be Rodgers buying time, and then Adams beating his man on some third down plays. But it's turnovers. It's a fast start, and then you got to force Jimmy G into a mistake or two, and then your run defense has to be better. So it's a big ask for Green Bay. It's still a football game, but I think San Fran should win this game.